assumptions that we need to move forward. Continuing on, right? We need to know something about retirement, right? When do you plan a retirement? What kind of income do you need? All of these are questions that we ultimately need to incorporate into a complete plan. And let's not forget that in the end, we also have to kind of think about, well, what happens at the end? What happens at the end of our life? You know, how are things going to be distributed moving forward once a person has passed? What's going to happen to their assets? So, if we're engaged to conduct a comprehensive planning, right, we need to assess each of those core planning areas, right? So essentially what we're saying here is, look, they have a plan, right? So how do you assess that? We need to look at, well, maybe it's a really good plan. Let's look at the strengths of the plan. What does the plan do that's good and working? What are the shortcomings? What are the things that are missing? Then obviously we want to fill in the gaps. We want to try. We don't have to redo everything that's ever been done. We just have to adjust the plan to match the current needs of the client. So obviously we need to, we can only do that when we understand the client's current goals and needs. I mean, the plan that they're using could have been a perfect plan 10 years ago, but now 10 years later it's just not working as well as it should. You know, we've talked about this all along. Here are the subject areas that we're going to talk about. They have added one more thing here. They've talked about business planning, especially for entrepreneurs. This is really important. How are they going to end the business, or how is the business going to end sometime in the future? When we communicate, right, when we're talking about these plans, and if we get to chapter 17, we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail, but you know, we have to speak to clients in a way that they really can understand. You have to have an air of empathy. You have to be able to bring them into the conversation, if you will. And quite frankly, I think at the end we need to, these two things are important. You have to link the recommendations to the goals. You have to show them how what you think they should do, how that's going to get them where they want to go. And then we have to figure out a way to get them to act. We need to find ways to promote action on their part. I mean, we're ready to go typically as planners. We have to get them then to ultimately pull the trigger and move forward. So we're going to create a prioritized implementation timeline. We've talked about this. Sometimes they refer to these as triptychs or action plans. We need to assign responsibilities. We need to have some support for the client for whatever they might need. So here's an example of that, right? Here's what we're going to do. These are the 4 things that we're going to do. This is the people who are going to be involved. And then here's the date when this has to be done. So on March 21st, we're going to buy a $100,000 term life policy, and we're going to increase the umbrella policy on their liability to $3 million. Who's going to do that? Well, the client and the agent are going to work to get that done. We're going to open a 529 plan. Who's going to do that? The client and the planner. We're going to do that by June 15th. We need to update our will. We need to get that done by April 30th, right? So all of those things need to fall into place, and now we have a timeline to make sure things get done at appropriate time frames. Finally, we have to start talking about monitoring. We have to, is the plan working? So we have to look at performance. We have to compare it to benchmarks. We have to be aware of any kind of changes that may have happened legally, tax-wise, in the economy. We're going to have to provide clients with some reports and ongoing support. And typically what I like to do with clients when I work with them is usually I say, look, once we get the plan, once we've started something and we get moving, I say, I'll probably call you, once a month for the first 6 months or so. But then after that, we won't have to talk quite as often. And then eventually we get down to a point where, when you feel comfortable with what's happening, that we're moving forward and you're seeing progress, we'll probably only have to talk then once a year, unless something happens on your side, that's a major change, a concern that you have. And of course, then you can just call me up and we'll talk about it. So we, once we start the monitoring process, it's really just a continual improvement kind of a process. Certainly we have to worry about regulation, right? So the federal, state, industry regulations, there's some legal guidelines, right? There's trade associations that we have to deal with. There are firm guidelines and regulations that we have to work with. So, we have to follow, as planners, we have to follow all of these rules and regulating groups. Quite frankly, typically, if you're doing the right thing, you should never have to worry about any of those things. So, what should the contract ultimately have or discuss? I don't know why this checklist thing is showing up here, but it is. So your contract should specify, right, the services you're going to do, the compensation, the type of compensation, and what the client's responsibilities are. And quite frankly, I think here is just a kind of a good place to kind of talk about this. There are really two basic ways that compensation is created. There is currently a movement to try to move financial planners to a fee-based program, where essentially the fees that are paid are based more on a per hour thing. It's kind of like going to a lawyer. You know how expensive that is. So you're going to have to pay per hour for fee-based. Commission-based is historically the way planners were paid. Now the reason for moving to fee-based is because there are a few bad apples, obviously, in every basket. But people that were commission-based, some of them were doing bad things. They weren't acting in a fiduciary manner and doing things that are good with the client. So what they would do is they would be padding their commissions by trades, etc. So they said, well, geez, if we go to fee-based, then the things that we decide on won't have anything to do with compensation. So they'll be outside of that realm. And the challenge with that, I personally think the challenge with that is that in the end, a fee-based system is a system similar to the law system, where not too many people have a lawyer that they could call any one time. It's too expensive to keep one on retainer, right? So you don't want to have a fee-based system. It limits the people that would talk to you. So commission-based in a world that's well regulated and has some rules that people have to follow. Quite frankly, that's the way I work, and I think it works out fairly well for everybody, because I, as a planner, I believe that I am ethical, and I believe that I always do what I think is best for the client. I have turned down business that I didn't feel comfortable with. I have recommended things to clients that had lower compensation than the higher compensation. It's my opinion, it's the best way to work. So how does this whole plan work? You kind of see here, here's what the client does, here's what the planner does. Again, you can read down through this, it's in your notes. But obviously we're going to qualify the client, we're going to sign a contract, and then we're going to start the work. We're going to gather data. We're going to do some analysis, refine some goals, look at the data, formulate the plan. We're going to present the plan. We're going to implement the plan, and then we're going to monitor and review the plan. And what happens then? So it comes right back up here to the beginning again, and we start this analysis piece again. So it's a never-ending circle. And we look kind of linear on this one page, but it does have a feedback loop. So we definitely continue on with our plan as we go through.